project executive of the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, and we are very pleased to welcome you to to this session. So one important aspect really is for us to have a common understanding of what is the future that we want to build for our grandchildren. What is the destination, the final destination of our journey? And what does it mean in terms of needs? So for example, by 2050, how the needs for nutrient for 10 billion people, because we don't want to leave anybody behind, how this need will be satisfied? What will be the product? What will be the value chain? So meaning, what are the value chain of the future, the forward-looking value chain that will be able to deliver on the need of nutrition and health, and do it in a way that is aligned with the climate and sustainability goal, while being supportive to enhance biodiversity, while contributing to land regeneration, while providing flourishing life to the 10 billion people, and while providing solutions that fit under the planetary boundary. So once we have identified these forward-looking value chains, the value chain of the future, the next question is how innovation can support their development and their upscale deployment. So this is what we would like to discuss here. And we have some entities that have already experience in developing this solution and contributing in building such type of value chain. So I will start by providing the floor. So the first speaker will be, why don't you start, Dennis, under these topics and share with us what are your views.
Thank you very much, Massamba, and fantastic to have this panel, because I think this might be the panel that is lacking the most if we look around at this COP, because we're so focused on the carbon that we lose the focus on everything else. There are people talking about a carbon tunnel vision now. And the worst thing about this, as Massamba was mentioning, is that we miss the focus on humans and other life on this planet. Because after all, carbon is the problem. But the opportunity is to provide people and all living beings on this planet flourishing lives. And I think that's one of the challenges I've had, my background go back to decades with many environmental NGOs, etc., has been a lack of a clear reference point. We've been fighting against negative trends, trying to push them back, stop deforestation, stop all these bad things. But I think what we are getting to now, and the benefit with this 1.5 degree for climate, is that people start setting very clear targets. Not always good targets, but with the resources, we still don't have that. And I think that's where this triangle between half Earth, we can only use half of the regenerative resources on the planet because the rest should be for the rest of biodiversity. That leaves us with a certain amount of biomaterial. The rest should be recycled or reused, not extracted. That should be the vision. And on the other side, we had, as Massamba said, now 7, but we need to plan for 10 and 11 billion people before population starts to plan out or reduced. So that means that today, the infrastructure that will be in place when the children being born today are old needs to plan for resource-efficient solutions that allow us to live flourishing lives for 11 billion people. And if we have those things, we can start asking, how is it to be a nurse, a teacher, a climber, a scientist, a fashion person in that world? And I think if we start providing that, we will see that many of the most exciting and passionate lifestyles are compatible. Most artists, most scientists are very close to that. But some of those who are portrayed as attractive lifestyles are furthest away. not to name anyone, but I usually name Kim Kardashian as sort of one example of what we call an obscene lifestyle when you have more than 250 pair of shoes. I think if she sees the cost of that for people on the planet, she would not do that. But we haven't got to that yet. We are still on the academic scene discussing these things. It's not the influencers and media people that are doing these things that are providing that message. So that's really what my sort of initial reflection is, that if we can get this 11 billion people, half Earth, then we have the room to play with. But we shouldn't say that as saying, reduce this, reduce this, reduce this. We should say, build this. Create these opportunities and provide these solutions so people can live flourishing lives. And especially in the global south, no one should ever hear that they should reduce something. They should only hear how they can get better health, better nutrition, better education. And if they don't hear that, we are so wrong. If there's someone who needs to change their education, their food, etc., that's the global north and the rich people. So that's really also a message I really need to be clear about, that who are we targeting here? Population growth, etc. Never put the blame on the global south and the poor. It is the global north that is setting their agenda, and it's the global north who has established the lifestyles that are totally unsustainable. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. I will now give the floor to Dr. Medrilzam, Director of Environmental Affairs, Ministry of National Development Planning, BAPPENAS Government of Indonesia. Please, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. Well, this is a very interesting topic, and I see that what the previous speaker has already mentioned, actually we need to be very clear about what sort of concrete measures that we are going to tackle with. I know that in many, I think most government, when we are talking about climate, they are still focusing in reducing emissions, right? Reducing carbon emissions. But for us, reducing carbon emissions, basically it's just a kind of an outcome or outcome of our development targets. Actually, what we are aiming for, actually more on the outputs from our policy interventions. You're correct that certainly we have to reduce or stop deforestations. We have to increase the share of our renewable energy in our energy mix and all those kind of climate measures. However, I think what we really would like to see in the future, so basically first, that climate measures need to be integrated with the national development priorities. I have observed in many countries right now, climate measures actually are segregated with development measures. This is not in line complete with Article 3.4 of the UNFCCC, which mentioned very clearly that this has to be integrated. I think this is because of the institutional constraints that usually different line ministries actually run the issues separately. That's the first one. And the second one, we need to see that we cannot see that climate interventions conducted in a silo mode. It is very often when talking about energy, they just talk about energy without compromising that energy. Sometimes they need lands, they need they need trees, and there are still many others. They don't connect each other. When we design our forest policy, but then it's just talking about forests. Nothing at all we can link this forest issue with, for example, agricultures or even infrastructures. Because of course, populations need infrastructures, and sometimes they have to, and sometimes have to closing step by step to the forest area. So the point here is actually, we cannot see in the futures that the climate measures implemented in a silo. It has to be an integrated mode. Started from planning. because this is one of the issues. When talking about planning, it is very often that we design our development in a silo mode. In our country, in Indonesia, at the moment we change the way we design our planning. We use the systems-based approach to integrate, to see the holistic aspect of our developments and link all the targets, say for example, the outcomes. So we have to link our economic targets and with our emission reduction target, for example, and even with our human development index, our Gini ratio, and all those kind of things. So at the moment, at the government level, start from the planning, we have already tried to see that this is more in an integrated manner. And certainly, this is not an easy way to change the way we think, but in the context of our country at the moment, since COVID also create a lot of setbacks to our development targets, and luckily, our presidents talked very strongly that stated that we have to go for a greener way in the future. So then green economy is one of the game changer in our economic transformations. So in this case, it seems to us that, well, when talking about green economy, so then we need to see that the economy as a whole, not just about green GDP, because when people talking about green economy, people talk a lot about green GDP, but that's not the case. Actually, when we talk about green economy, it should be the whole aspect of the economy that has to be changed, and not about economy itself and environmental itself, but also the social aspect itself need to be aligned. So, in this case, looking at from the holistic perspective and also the way we think that we cannot be in silo mode and green economy is the pathway to go for the futures, I think, I believe most countries need to see that they have to be very clear then how to link all development aspects, how to see the interrelatedness of the overall development aspects, and also, of course, with climate measures. But we see that the climate measures is one of the outcomes. And if you look at our planning document right now, we succeed to include the emission reduction targets to become one of the macroeconomic indicators besides GDP, Gini ratio, and all those kind of things. So actually what I would like to underline that if we want to manage our resources, manage our climate measures, certainly we have to see in a more integrated way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very important point. The first point that you have mentioned, while decarbonization and emission reduction is relevant for the global north, for most countries in the global south, the focus should be put on clean development and avoided emission. We have to develop and develop in a way that avoid emission, in a way that is aligned with the climate and the sustainability goal. A second important point that we have made is that climate and sustainability should be integrated. It's not about climate development and sustainability aside. The two need to be integrated, and one of the things that we are promoting within the Global Innovation Hub is even innovation for climate need to be mainstream into innovation for sustainability. The other point that you have mentioned, very important, is this holistic approach with a coordination in all directions. Vertical coordination between national government and local government, as well as horizontal coordination among ministry. And I fully agree with you because you have countries where the NDC does not talk to the strategy for developing the energy sector, and you end up with situations that are extremely difficult to manage. So thank you for this very important point. And then I will move to the next panelist, Mrs. Ramona Liberoff. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Massamba, and also to the IRP for the invitation to speak on this very important topic. My name is Ramona Liberoff. I'm the executive director of something called the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy, which is hosted by the World Resources Institute. So obviously my colleagues at WRI have spent many years looking at limits. But I wanted to sort of pick up on a couple of the other points that Dennis and the doctor from BAPPENAS have mentioned, which is we need nothing less than a wholesale systems change in the way we think about things, because right now we live in a world where most people have insufficient resources and some people effectively have too many. And while I would really hesitate to speak about anything as a silver bullet apart from silver bullets, there is something in the widespread systemic adoption of the circular economy that can genuinely solve many of these issues. And I wanted to give you a very concrete example or two that's going to be the focus of our work in the next year. So we are facing the great challenge, the grand challenge and the grand opportunity to decarbonize energy and to provide abundant energy from renewables. However, we are going to face a short, sharp shock in requiring many, many more materials. Estimates vary anywhere from 30 to 60% more material than we have now, knowing that the mining and extraction of these resources is exceptionally intensive. So we have a remarkable opportunity to use circular thinking to reimagine every step of that heavily industrial process, and also recognize that we have riches beyond riches already present in our drawers, in our cupboards, in our garages in the global north, where if we actually manage to get those things out and use them again and think about how we designed for circularity from the beginning, we would actually be able, at a conservative estimate, to save anywhere between 30 and 60% of what we need, which gets us to where we need to get to. But I would say that that requires, as Dennis said, a complete reimagining of the challenge. This is not a recycling challenge. And when I do see circular economy spoken about or written about in national strategies, it tends to talk about what to do about the problem, the consequence, the CO2 equivalent in human-made waste and supply chains. I think, Massamba, your point about new value chains is absolutely right. We need to imagine them. And in addition to renewable energy, the clean energy value chain, which is one to reimagine, I want to talk about another one, and that's finance. So for too long, we have been measuring the cost of everything and the value of not very much. And the need to reimagine how we finance the gap. Everyone will tell you that circularity costs more. It only costs more because we're not measuring the right things. And I believe public actors, governments, and banks as well. I heard the last speaker say that governments and banks must step up to finance green hydrogen. I would actually argue governments and banks have a much better opportunity and a much better deal if they finance circularity, because the size of that gap is a whole lot smaller than building out a completely different industrial infrastructure which effectively replicates the problem. I'll stop there for the moment, but I wanted to leave you with that provocation, and thanks to the earlier speakers for setting me up so well. Massamba.
Thank you so much. And we are very pleased now to have Mrs. Izabella with us, co-chair of the International Resource Panel. And so I will give you the floor for you to provide the keynote speech. We will give you the floor for you to deliver the keynote speech of the session.
I had to breathe, sorry. Thank you very much. I'm sorry because I'm late, but it was another panel. And it's a mess today, okay? I need a GPS to find myself in this place, but okay. First of all, thank you very much. On behalf of International Resource Panel, I'm absolutely happy to have the opportunity to join you exactly to discuss changing systems for planetary stability and the role of science in our perspective, and how indeed it's absolutely important how science must seduce people to act considering science. This is very important because sometimes people understand the scientific message, but it's all based on threats, okay? And we need to shift the way to mobilize people to make sure that we can come together and we'll be able to have solutions, we'll be able to come together, even consider our diversity and consider how we need to learn how to listen to the diversity of countries and societies, because it's not coming because we have the same perspective, but because we can share trajectories to achieve solutions. So I think that when you go into the resource efficiency use agenda, it's something absolutely touchable and tangible because people can see this. Nobody knows what a carbon is. You ask people to believe that carbon is a problem, but nobody never sees a carbon. But when manage water, people believe know what is. People know what land degradation is. People knows a lot what air pollution means. And also how important it is to make people to connect the right dots and believe that they have choice. And even in countries that unfortunately don't have alternatives, the countries that have alternatives, like Brazil, my one, we need to have this ambition to come together. And this ambition to come together is always, in my personal opinion, based in a way to promote peace with people. We are so fragmented today. We are so, after COVID, the spoiler of a planetary crisis, it was a COVID pandemic. This was a spoiler. It's a fresh minute to say, okay, look what it means to deal with planetary disruption process. Okay, and I understand when I have been discussing in International Resource Panel, not only how we should come together, the three scientific panel, IPCC, IPBES, and IRP, we are coming together, but we need to come into resource efficient use to make sure that there are not enough resource available for humankind if we're not able to change our way to live and our way to produce, our way to have economic growth. So circularity is not only a way to express new economies, a way to express a new movement, a new behavior, because you are part of a planet that is a circular one. And I think that we need to use really some perspective, innovative perspective, to make sure that we're able to act now. We want always to say and to try to bring people consider 1.5 Celsius degree target. And this is a green wishing. It's a green wishing for the future. It's a long-term perspective. But what is happening today is a consequence of 1.2. Okay, this is 1.2. If you ask me, this lady is taking a photo, exactly, she's taking a photo of 1.2. And we need to make clear for people understand this very well. We need to go to local communities, when we go to discuss, even for the president, to take decision, to explain better why you need to change. It's absolutely critical that you can share what is happening today is 1.2 or closer to 1.2. Okay? And our core responsibilities, because we're not able to change enough in the last 30 years, these are expressed in 1.2. And the science says, well, you have 1.2 and you have the extreme events happening, and people so vulnerable, countries so vulnerable, economies so vulnerable, and you need to learn how we can promote economic growth and social inclusion if you want to bring nature together. And this is a new way. The new way, it's not only nature-based solutions because you want to have a new relationship with humankind and nature. It's not only carbon market. In my personal experience, we know that nature is vital. If you want to have a better life, we need to come together with nature. Nature means to have inclusion. Nation means for a country, as my country, that now we have a hope to be back. How important to connect climate, biodiversity, and democracy. How important to renew democracy, because democracy means that you have freedom and choice, and you can understand not only the supply side, but the demand side. And you can of course, share some innovative perspectives that innovation can bring to us, but it's more to access a mobile. It's how indeed you will be influenced to change your behavior because you have choice. And this is something that sometimes my friends, the policymakers, they don't understand very well, because we have this contradiction, these tensions better, between short-term and long-term perspectives. It's like, in short-term perspective, we can postpone. In long-term perspective, we need to achieve something that believe that will happen. I hope that God become low-carbon gods. I do hope this. But before this, I'm waiting. But I think that we can change, we can play in a different direction. And that's why, in my opinion, science must come, okay, to provide also the new languages that you need. What's happened in COVID-19 pandemic, it was very clear. We stopped 1 year, 1.5 years, waiting for a vaccine. Okay, everyone's here. Everyone's here were under the same pressure. We were afraid to die. Yes, everyone's. Even rich people, you are in Switzerland. It's not impossible to take your aircraft to go to Maldives. No, you have to stay there, and you have to wait a solution that you need to break our confidence because we need a 5-year cycle to test the vaccine. No, the first year we have, yes, let's do it. And what's happening in the world? This is a spoiler of a global crisis. And this is it was a virus. Can you imagine how disruptive nature can be in the next 30 years when you move from 1.2 from 1.5? So my feeling is that when you go into this agenda, when you go looking for to connect the dots, when you go to understand better how we can come into well-being, we need to learn how to couple things. So if you go connect the dots, if you go into nature and you like to discuss nature-based solution, restoration, we need to couple this well-being. We need to couple this with security. We need to couple this with lifestyle and what it means consider the diversity of society. Finally, I think that it's very important when you go into planetary stability to understand that it brings to us not only planetary boundaries, global commons, the new agenda that's coming, science is provoking this, but we have a new geopolitical dimension, the planetary ones. You don't have the institutional arrangements, you don't have our institutions prepare, and even our power, the geopolitics, prepare to deal with this. Because you can be a superpower country, but you don't have nature, you don't have alternatives. This is the planetary geopolitical dimension that's coming. And to face this and to come together, it's important to understand not only the South-South cooperation that's new, because we have Western and Eastern road that should come together, but also the North and South cooperation, but Ms. Renew. Cooperation is absolutely, international cooperation is essential, it's crucial to make the difference in a positive way. So I do believe that the next 3 years will be very important for the international community because we have Bretton Woods reform next year, and we have the summit for the future in by 2024. And by 2025, we'll have this momentum of Paris Agreement that we need to check not only the numbers, globe stock taking, but we need to check how humanity will be together or not with us to move together solutions in climate change. It's critical for us to understand this lack of credibility, the lack of trust that we have today between developing and developing countries. We need to find a way to preserve the relationship. It's important to find solutions with money, financial flows, but in most of this, we need to build up the new political conditions to bring the world together. And this is very important for international community, not only the state members. We need to have international systems be more transparent and with the inclusion of civil society, with other players that will be co-responsible for our decisions. We need to open institutions. We don't need to close institutions. Forget it, because we have satellites. And my last comment. In the past, you used to say that diplomacy takes notes. If you like to say something, let's check with the diplomats, because they know what's happened 10 years ago. Today, you have diplomacy, but you have Google. I'm sorry, you check Google, you know everything that's happened. It's absolutely true. This is the new world. This is a century that will be the convergence of a climate age with digital technological age. And we need to discuss what citizenship we want in the world. So my feeling is that you must come together, but we need to review our governance system. We need to review the way that you approach to come together. And we need to play based on solutions and actions in short-term perspective. Don't postpone it anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. a lot of great ideas that we can use as takeaway system change, but within the planetary boundary, the most renewable among the renewable energy is the energy that is not used, which is extremely important. We need first to make redundant before increasing efficiency. The first thing to do is to make redundant. We also need to have an holistic approach to address the challenge. And most importantly, and really here there is a big alignment with the Global Innovation Hub. Innovation, we know, has an agenda. I always say that science can be considered as value neutral because it searches for truth, but innovation has an agenda. Unfortunately, so far, innovation has been mainly used to build power, economic power and military power. Now there is a need to refocus innovation to serve people and planet. So moving from a society of extraction to production, a society of destruction to regeneration, a society that is alienating to a one that is empowering, and system change, but also change of behavior, change of lifestyle, and collaboration. I also strongly believe that without collaboration, there is no way for us to address the big challenge. And we need radical collaboration, and we need to reinvent new pattern for working together. That's absolutely needed. Now so you see, we have a lot of takeaway. So I would like now to turn to our next speaker, Mrs. Aline Mosnier. Aline, you have the floor to share your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good afternoon. So I will focus now on the food system, and I think that then it will echo a lot of points raised by the other speakers. So food security is really key for human needs. It's one of the most basic needs, and it relies extensively on land and water use. Until recently, these two resources were seen as at our disposal, without limits. So now we start seeing that it fires back. We have climate change, we have biodiversity loss that compromises some ecosystem services that also we benefited for production of food. We have water depletion, we have water pollution, and this compromises our ability to achieve food security in the future. First thing, overconsumption. We currently have a problem of overconsumption in most of the high-income countries, but also it is a growing problem also in the global south. And one thing which is really good, I think a good argument for the food system, is that this leads to health issues. So it's not like overconsumption of, we mentioned shoes, for example, last time, which is probably quite neutral on the health. But here for food, it really creates a social problem, a social burden, death related to cardiovascular diseases, related to diabetes, and so on. So this is really where we need to stop wasting resources by cutting consumption. Currently, we have recommendations, for example, of about 2,500 kilocalories per day for an adult with moderate activity. If we do an average at the country level, taking into account that we have children, we have older people with lower needs, we need about 2,200 kilocalories per day at a country level. Currently in the world, we have 70 countries, mostly in the north, but also in the south, where the food consumption is above 3,000 kilocalories. So here we can see that we have a lot of room for improvement and for saving resources. Second, the resource intensity varies widely across products, across food products, but also across practices. So I think that now the meat issue has been raised again and again. There is a strong overconsumption of meat. And why is it a problem? It's because meat requires a lot of resources. Because most of our animals are fed with crops. And in fact, most of the cropland is used to feed animals. So this is also one way to really reduce the resource use, is to shift and change the diet composition. And what we see over the last 2 decades, for instance, is not going into the right direction. In high-income countries, we stabilize or slightly increase the consumption of meat, But in low-income countries, because of economic downturns and COVID crisis and so on, we see a reduction, where this is still there where we have room and we should increase meat consumption. So here we have things wrong currently, and we need urgent action to change that. Second, production systems, of course, are very different, and the energy or the resource intensity of our production varies widely across production within the country and across countries. So here, I think this is indeed innovation about how to encourage practices for farming, which would minimize the need for resources, but also maybe also some thoughts about trade, the role of trade. What would be better for us to import in a country, and where to reallocate our production where we can save resource at the global level. Of course, these are really delicate issues. We need to be very cautious about that. Self-sufficiency, we see also that trade has increased a lot for food products, but it has also increased the vulnerability of some countries, and we saw that with COVID. So especially for food, we need a cautious approach for trade, but this can be part of the solution if well designed. And finally, there is a lot of waste of resources. So for example, I will just take the example of water. Irrigation system are among the most wasteful system in terms of resource use on the planet. And I believe that this is because of also most of our natural resources, we didn't evaluate the cost of these resources properly. And when it's cheap, we waste it. So I think that probably there are a lot of solutions now that exist to reduce the waste of our resources, of water use for irrigation system, of land use, increasing productivity in a sustainable way. But we need to finally take into account the cost of these natural resources, and that it becomes more costly to waste these resources. And then people will be cleverer, people will innovate, people will adopt innovations, but this needs to be changed in most of the countries of the world. Maybe as a final point is that models, I come also from a modeling background, so I can say that I find that they are very useful tools when we are talking about this complexity and the need for a system approach. Why? Because when we come from a specific sector, it's very hard to see all the implications on the overall sectors, on the trade issues are also very complicated. And models are nice tools to put all this complexity in a way where people can play and test and see the consequences of one single action, of a combination of actions on the ability to meet multiple objectives by 2030, by 2050. So this is really something that as in the FABLE Consortium that I animate now from SDSN side, we really try to build these local capacities to have this integrated system approach modeling for the food and land systems, so that in 2030, 2050, we can have already roadmaps that reach both the climate targets, but also more generally the resource use efficiency increase.
Thank you. Thank you. Very important measure to further enhance circularity, reducing overconsumption, and reducing waste, which are two important measures. Now I would like to turn over to our last speaker, which is not the least, Mrs. Maria Savitchidis, CEO EIT Urban Mobility. Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Massamba. Can I share my presentation? Is that possible? So I don't have the rights to share my presentation. I don't know, is that possible to give me the control? Yes, thank you very much. So, yes, so good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Maria Savitchidis. Thank you for having me in this fantastic panel. So EIT is the largest innovation community for urban mobility in Europe. So 5 years ago, when talking about transport innovation, the center of interest would have been always new technologies, solutions like this one. While today, the conversation has shifted, fortunately, to this. So the question of how do we want to live in cities, and how does the mobility system, the solutions of mobility and transport support this vision for people. So in terms of space use, the car is the most inefficient mode of transport. In a city like Barcelona, and I will be talking a lot about Europe, so forgive me. So in a city like Barcelona, 60% of the public space is dedicated to motorized traffic, although motorized traffic accounts for only 25% of modal share. So there is a great inequality, and that inequality became very evident and felt during COVID. So this is a picture of COVID in times in Copenhagen, when there was, of course, less traveling by car and more people walked and cycled their neighborhoods. And so in cities, when there is no cars occupying the roads, you see that actually people occupy the space. So more than anywhere else in cities, the space for transport competes with the space for recreational movement, walking, cycling, social interaction, of course, recreation in green and blue spaces, people playing, engaging in sports activities, entertainment, and so on. So unfortunately, today in this competition, the motorized individual transport has been the winner. So transportation today, we know, is the major driver, not only for greenhouse gas emissions, but land degradation, soil sealing, which is in cities, of course, associated with heat island effects, and the impact on people's health, loss of biodiversity, and people prematurely dying due to air pollution, noise, and the lack of green space, which has a big impact on not only the physical, but the psychological health of people. So we know that with the current framework, the policy framework that we have, we will not reach net zero. We will not decarbonize the transport sector. So it is today projected that the CO2 emissions from road transport in the European Union will decrease only by 35% by 2050. So why is that? What about all the great technology that we have, the electric vehicles? Will that not solve the problem? So indeed, partly, electric mobility, of course, will contribute to these 35% of decrease, which is not enough by far, of course. But the transport demand, that is projected to keep increasing. So we've only seen this steep dip due to COVID, but actually it's projected to increase. So this is where we have to change the innovation paradigm in transport. So innovation transport in the past and today still is primarily about gaining efficiency to maximize physical movement. So today we can go faster, we have lighter materials, we have better engines, drivetrains, and with all of that we can build cars, trains, ships, airplanes that can travel faster on less fuel per weight unit. But then how have we utilized those advancements and efficiency gains? Well, not to save time or use less space for roads, or to spend less on mobility. Actually, we have used it to consume more. So bigger and heavier cars. So in 2020 in the US, over 40% of the new cars sold were SUVs. And the average size increase of the top models sold was 60%. 60%. So, and that's both in weight and in the area that they consume, so that their actual size. We travel longer distances. We have globalized supply chains, and we have decoupled where we live in cities from where we work or shop for groceries. So this has driven urban sprawl and led to, most of the times, dysfunctional and monocentric cities. So all the efficiency gains through innovation have been eaten up by growth in transport demand. So we do have solutions that will reduce emissions, but all those technological advancements will not solve the problems that come with transport as long as demand keeps increasing. So we have to stop this over-reliance on technology-focused improvements, and we have to focus on how to avoid transport and how to actually create more livable cities. So I will present you two brilliant concepts that are used to regenerate cities, that are centered around the needs of citizens and not centered around providing transport capacity. So, and these are, of course, representative of similar approaches that we see emerging in cities around the world. So the first one is the 15-minute city. So that is the new human-oriented urban planning paradigm, and it's been championed by Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo, and it is a source of inspiration across the world to rethink European and global cities. So it's an urban setup where locals are able to access all of their basic essentials at distances that are less than 50 minutes by foot or by bicycles, so that people actually don't need a car and they don't need to drive a car. So some elements of that concept in Paris are, for instance, that schools are open to the public after classes and on weekends to allow for different use of that space. The removal of half of Paris on-street parking spots is planned, so to make more space for green areas, for playgrounds, for bicycle parking. All streets will be made cycle-friendly by 2026. And of course, cycling needs safe parking locations as well. So this will be provided. And they focus first on pilot neighborhoods, then evaluate, how to improve it and how to scale it then to other districts all across the city. So can this be replicated in other cities that have different topologies? And we analyzed 16 cities around the world, and there is a report that will be published next week on this. So yes, it can. So there are different topologies, but there are key principles for human-centered urban planning. And some of those, so in the geospatial planning are proximity, of course, to essential services and to public transport, the density and the mixed land use in cities. And then there are urban design factors like walkable, cyclable streets, placemaking, inclusiveness, ubiquity. So it is possible, and it is being proven as viable concept in cities already. Another global best practice are the Barcelona superblocks. So this is an urban design concept that is also prioritizing people over cars with a focus on accessibility and also a focus on community engagement. So the superblock forms an urban unit made of 9 or 4 urban blocks, and the inner streets of those blocks, they are close to through traffic. So the main purpose of the streets becomes dwelling and not transport. So vehicles are allowed, yes, but primarily for accessing the residences, for public transport, mobility impaired people, of course, and speed limit is 10 kilometers per hour. So even for bicycles within this block that is for people is limited. So this initiative goes hand in hand, of course, with a redefinition of mobility. It needs specific measures, and Barcelona defined 300 measures in mobility, including pedestrian-only streets, expanding the bike network, expanding the public transport network surrounding those superblocks to ensure that there is, of course, accessibility to mobility for all. So Barcelona today has 6 fully functional superblocks already there, and plans to have another 500 superblocks throughout the city in the future. So this comes with a price, of course, and it's not been an easy path. So there has been pushback from, especially from business owners, but also residents when this started. And policymakers have been persistent, and they have relentlessly engaged in a dialogue with the citizens. And the city has now created...
Sorry, can you now wrap up, because we are at the end of the session. Sorry for that.
Yes. So the point here is, so there is proof of concepts. These concepts exist. So it's up to the society, to policymakers, to have the courage actually to make it happen, convinced with a positive vision of creating healthy and equitable cities. So thank you, and sorry for taking the time.
No, thank you. Thank you. Very interesting perspective, which is completely aligned with the vision of the Global Innovation Hub. We also believe that innovation needs to be used beyond the sectoral level, where it can only lead to incremental change. But we need to go back to the core human need and explore how innovation can help satisfy them in a way that is aligned with the climate and sustainability goal. And the example of mobility is a very important one, because replacing combustion car with electric vehicle is, but having less car is even better. Thank you. So I would like to invite you to provide a round of applause to our very, very good speakers. Thank you.